Avengers Endgame finally gave Marvel fans the movie moment they've been waiting for, an epic battle where every single hero appeared to take on Thanos, and Thanos earned that response by posing a universe-level threat, the annihilation of half of all life.
And when we faced extinction, I offered a solution.
Genocide.
Thanos made his beliefs clear in Infinity War. Whether you're a human, Asgardian, a sentient tree, or whatever the heck Mantis is, you contributed to the end of the universe. Resources are finite, Thanos said, and the only way to hold on to them is to have less mouths to feed. While there is some sense in Thanos' concern, wiping out billions of lives is not the most reasonable answer. Good thing that, spoiler warning, the Avengers do a snap of their own in Endgame. This snap brings back all the lives lost when Thanos snapped. That's half a universe's worth of beings all reappearing instantly. Is that any better than Thanos' plan? Let's talk first about what happened right after Thanos snapped in Infinity War.
Something's happening.
We get a glimpse of the horrible aftermath in the movie's after-credits sequence when Nick Fury and Maria Hill are turned to dust.
Oh no.
It's chaos. Cars suddenly lose their drivers and crash into anything and everything nearby. A helicopter loses its pilot and spins into a building. This can't be isolated to New York City either. Vehicles and heavy machinery all over the world probably caused massive damage, taking more lives than just those lost in the snap. Meanwhile, the first responders in charge of, well, responding to such a crisis were probably snapped away too. Not all of them, but just enough to make the recovery process even more difficult. That's just the ground level reaction to the snap, also known as the devastation in official Marvel materials. Unfortunately, the chaos would spread higher up to affect entire nations. What happens when half the government turns to dust? You know that some important world leaders were lost. And yet there wouldn't be time for special elections when everyone's homes are on fire or crushed by a downed helicopter. You could also forget about trade or the economy. To put it simply, the post-snap world should be a brutal place, like something out of Mad Max where people fight for whatever resources are left.
I got it!
Because remember, Thanos also snapped away half of all animal life. That would lead to some massive food shortages, unless the people that remain are all vegan. Point to the vegans for that one. Just imagining that scenario should show why the Avengers were right.
How do we do this?
As a team.
Thanos, despite his good intentions, had a hasty plan to save the universe.
With all 6 stones, I could simply snap my fingers.
Simply hitting the delete button of half of all life would create entirely new problems and doom those who are left to struggle and suffer. Also, taking out Spider-Man is just plain wrong. The thing is, the terrible world of the devastation doesn't happen. When we fast forward to 5 years later in Endgame, we find a world that mostly operates like our own. Sure, it's depressing and bleak, but it's no Hunger Games. After all, Captain America is leading a therapy group, Hulk is taking selfies with starstruck children, Tony is able to peacefully retire and start a family. They probably wouldn't be doing all that if there were more pressing concerns like warlords hoarding all the food. So what happened? How did the world move on even if the Avengers didn't? Some places probably settled leadership by force. Black Panther showed us how Wakanda decides its kings. With T'Challa gone, there could have been lots of infighting among the various tribes. Or maybe M'Baku stepped up and peacefully took over. However, there are many other countries where that probably wasn't the case. Or, for that matter, entire worlds. We know, thanks to Captain Marvel, that many worlds fell into chaos after the snap. That's why she can't offer much help to the Avengers during their time heist. But for some reason, she makes time to get a haircut and a costume change.
We're too late!
I shouldn't have stopped for that haircut. Sorry.
Things do eventually settle down, at least in the United States where the Avengers live. It's likely that enough of the government survived to stabilize things. 5 years is enough time to put things back into some kind of order. Hulk's giant diner breakfast proves that any food shortages have been addressed. There must still be an economy to allow things like diners and the storage space that holds Ant-Man's van to operate. In those 5 years, the world is pretty much back to normal. Our heroes aren't, as the movie constantly reminds us, but society as a whole is. So now let's fast forward through the entire rest of Avengers Endgame to think about what happens near the end. You know, the most spoilery of all spoiler moments. When Bruce Banner takes on the Iron Infinity Gauntlet and snaps his fingers, he brings everyone who is lost back to life. Then Thanos appears from the past and there's a giant epic battle. What we learn from this is that everyone was brought back in the exact same place they disappeared from. Spider-Man says this when he reunites with Iron Man. That causes some problems. So let's go back to the initial crisis, cars and helicopters crashing. Remember that? What happens to those pilots and drivers? Since their vehicles literally moved on without them, do they just appear in the middle of the sky or the street? Imagine being the helicopter pilot who disappears only to reappear in midair without your helicopter. Or the commuter on his way home who suddenly feels their car go away. Now you're sitting on the highway during rush hour traffic. Both of these scenarios don't end very well. Might as well have just stayed snapped. Then there's those government officials. That'll be an awkward series of conversations. Do the revived get to take their leadership back, or are they out of a job? Again, less democratic countries probably have a more violent answer to that question. Really though, it's a question that affects most of the revived. Billions of people will return as if they've only been gone for seconds, only to find that it's years later and the world moved on without them. Also, they've been replaced at work. The economy will implode from having to accommodate a sudden insurgence of unemployed citizens. Cap better be ready to host more therapy sessions. Outside of the more intelligent life, all of the snapped animal life will also return. That would throw the natural world way out of whack. Ecosystems were probably just getting used to their new populations. Balance goes out the window once all those species are reintroduced in large numbers. All that to say that maybe bringing everyone back as quickly as they were erased was not the greatest idea.
You guys are so screwed now!
At best, there's going to be a lot of confused people. At worst, it'll bring about the exact doom scenario that Thanos fought to prevent. There could be wars over power as revived leaders fight against those who took their place. Resources might become an even bigger issue if the world spent those 5 years learning to provide for only its new population. And there's the simple question of where will they even put all these sudden extra people? Many could probably just return home like Ant-Man did. Others might find that they don't have a home to return to. But hey, at least Cap can get married and live happily ever after, right? Of course, this is a theory video, and like most theory videos, we're overthinking a bunch of stuff that the movies will probably never address. As we already saw in Avengers Endgame, the writers treat the reverse snap as a 100% good thing. There appear to be no consequences whatsoever. Going forward, Phase 4 could address some of the negative effects of the Infinity Stone shenanigans. Anything is possible at this point, but we won't hold our breath. Endgame shows that Marvel Studios doesn't care for going into the details of the devastation. Again, life in post-snap America doesn't seem so bad. Breakfast selfies aren't a sign of a fading world. There's an obvious reason for this.
Got any other bad ideas?
Endgame is already a 3-hour-long movie. That length is already a test of the most faithful fans' attention span and bladder. There's just no room to throw in an extra 20 to 30 minutes to explore the consequences of the snap. So instead, we get the focus on the emotional consequences of the snap. We see how the survivors grieve, how the fallen are memorialized. We get to watch the Avengers react to actually losing for once. Some refuse to give in even when there's no hope. Others are fine walking away from the hero life. Thor, well, we're just not gonna talk about him.
Thank you.
The point is, Endgame shies away from thinking about the stability of the post-snap world to put the focus on the characters. It makes sense because we, the audience, care more about Steve and Tony's relationship than we do about the Wakandan economy. Still, it does set the tone for how movies after Endgame will treat the snap. The trailers released for Spider-Man Far From Home already show us how the devastation will be remembered. That is to say, not really at all.
What just happened?
The first indication of this is the convenient fact that all of Peter Parker's friends got snapped. If some did survive, they would have aged 5 years. They'd be in college, unable to take part in the Midtown High shenanigans. Imagine a movie in which MJ was suddenly 5 years older than Peter. That would be awkward. Or if Ned, the guy in the chair, no longer went to school with Peter. Rather than deal with changing those character dynamics, the writers just chose to have these characters get erased along with Peter. Now they can continue going to school together, like nothing ever happened. One thing Far From Home can't sidestep is the death of Iron Man. Since Tony Stark was a mentor to Peter Parker, the movie has to address his heroic sacrifice. We expect an emotional remembrance somewhere towards the beginning of the movie. After that, Nick Fury seems to be replacing Stark as Spider-Man's mentor figure.
You're Nick Fury.
Phase 4 is still a mystery, but we know that it involves Captain Marvel, Black Panther, and Doctor Strange sequels. It just so happens that these characters weren't really heavily affected by the snap. Captain Marvel was helping out on other planets, but that mission is vague enough that writers could easily address it with a throwaway line. Endgame already shows Wakanda restored to its former glory, so it seems Black Panther 2 can also skip the snap's effects. Finally, a universe-ending threat is just another Tuesday to Doctor Strange. Expect his sequel to also move quickly on to the next thing. There's also a Black Widow prequel in the works, which won't delve into the snap because, you know, prequel. In any case, if a catastrophic event like the Thanos snap happened in real life, the world would descend into chaos. People would be fighting for power and food, at least those who didn't suddenly lose the will to live after seeing their loved ones turn to dust.
Guys.
Avengers Endgame isn't real life. It's a movie about superheroes. Still, it could have done more to explore the effects of the snap that took half of all life. Then again, if it did, the audience would have realized that poofing everyone back into existence was a terrible idea.
I have been falling for 30 minutes!
Phase 4 of the MCU will probably never address how the universe copes with the sudden return of billions. Instead, everything will be just A-okay as we move on to the next adventure. How would you have fixed the Thanos snap? Let us know in the comments. And be sure to subscribe to Behind the Screen and hit the like button to get more content like this.